So welcome everyone. This is a launch webinar for a new feature of Amazon OpenSearch service. And this feature is called MultiAZ with Standby. If you've been paying attention, you may have noticed that we've had 3 launch webinars in the last month. So a ton of new features coming at you, from OpenSearch Service Security Analytics to OpenSearch Ingestion, and now this one of MultiAZ with Standby. So we have assembled a few experts for you today, from Rohan, who's the Senior Product Manager, and Prashanth, who's a Senior Senior Solutions Architect with OpenSearch. So they talk to customers all the time. You'll get lots of good feedback from them. You can interact with us on the chat by asking questions there. We'll be monitoring that, as well as there will be some live polling today. So keep your hands near your keyboard, answer the questions, and then we'll share the results back with the whole audience here today. So with that, Rohan, let's move to the agenda. We're going to quickly cover what is OpenSearch and how does that relate to Amazon OpenSearch service. Then we'll dive into what specifically this new feature delivers for you, as well as a live demo. So cross your fingers that all the live systems are working today. And we'll talk to you about how to get started. So with that, Rohan, let's kick this off. So first, what is OpenSearch? OpenSearch is an open source, community-driven search and analytics suite. It has 3 major components, including that engine, that search and analytics engine, which is OpenSearch, as well as a dashboarding and visualization tool called OpenSearch Dashboards, as well as the very creatively named data preparation tool called, you guessed it, OpenSearch Data Prepper. So this was first launched in Q3 2021. Since then, we have seen really great attraction in the market for this tool. And we've reached 150 million downloads already. There are many contributors to the project, of course, AWS being one, but also Oracle, Avon, Bonsai GCP, and others, as well as a large number of partners that are building off of the solution. You can see the 200% growth in features that get pushed into OpenSearch. So as you can see from these launch webinars and the amount of attention in the market, just a lot of pace of innovation is moving very quickly with OpenSearch. And lastly, the thing that we're really proud of here is we're number 4 on the DB Engine's search engines ranking. So really proud of that, and you'll see us keep pushing on that ranking as we go forward. So how does that relate to Amazon OpenSearch service? Amazon OpenSearch service then is the fully managed service for OpenSearch clusters. So it really is trying to remove that heavy lifting of operating, maintaining, and securing your OpenSearch clusters. And of course, with attention to security and controlling your cost, and also like the how you're storing your data, as well as the data that you're bringing in to OpenSearch. And the last item here is observability. If you were at our launch webinar for security analytics as well, observability and security analytics are available right out of the box. No extra contracts, no extra cost, no extra spinning up of different services, all available right out of the box from the get-go. So we're really trying to reduce that friction. We want you to play with these new features and get the most value that you can out of all of them. So with that, let's hand it to Rohan to talk about the focus of this launch, which happened last week, which is really MultiAZ with Standby, with a focus on high availability. Rohan, talk to us about why high availability is important.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to speak to you about the new feature, MultiAZ with Standby for Amazon OpenSearch service. Why is high availability important? That's an important question that will also lay the foundation in terms of what we want to present to you today, how this new feature is going to help you achieve high availability. In the cloud, if you were to think of all the things that are there, the availability zones, the data centers, there are instances, there are racks, there are network switches, anything can fail, right? And you have to assume they will fail, right? So when you're designing your system for a cloud kind of an environment where these kind of failures are given, you have to build redundancy into your systems. If not, you will see the impact of these failures. For example, according to the Uptime Institute, nearly 30% of major outages in 2021 lasted more than 24 hours, which had business impact across the board, right? You had revenue failure, loss, you had business impact, downtime, and you need to, if you have your system as your business critical application is part of your business critical application, you need to have them up and running all the time. Otherwise, there's a direct impact on your business. So a lot of customers now use OpenSearch as part of their mission critical applications, right? Or business processes. And having it available at all times is critical for them. And always having consistent performance is also critical to them. Having said that, a lot of organizations do not understand OpenSearch very well, right? Uh, it is a distributed system. It has its own nuances in terms of how data is distributed, how it is structured, and that can lead to various scenarios where even though you might think you have configured it well, it does not respond to failure the way you anticipate, right? So we'll talk about some of those in the subsequent slides. So what does 99.99% availability mean? It's uh, a poll question. Hope you can answer that and maybe get it correct in terms of what does it mean? How much minutes of downtime is it in a year? And that will give you a sense of how big a challenge it is to meet something like 99.99%.
And check the chat.
Your
If you're
options.
not seeing the polling feature, check the chat. Dana has posted some instructions to get that polling feature up. We'll give you a quick minute to answer Rohan's quiz here. But in the meantime, maybe Rohan or Prashant, do you want to talk about what are common mistakes you see people making in trying to achieve their high availability goals?
Certainly. So, for example, when you think of OpenSearch, right, it is a distributed system out of the box. It is an assumption that, because of the distributed systems, if I have multiple nodes, if I have data which has been sharded and spread across these data nodes, and even if one data node goes down, I'll not lose the availability, or I'll not lose the systems, or the system will still be up and running and responding to queries, or you are able to insert data. That may not be always true, because it's not just about the number of nodes and the number of shards. It also depends on your copies of data. For example, if you have a primary shard, you also should be having replicas for those shards as well, to ensure that if the primary or a replica shard is lost, you still have a copy available to respond to queries, or it can be promoted to become the primary and take ingestion request as well. Right. So there are a bunch of factors. We'll touch upon some of those in the subsequent slides.
Perfect. And you guys may have noticed that you do have two poll questions. So you feel free to answer both of those. I think, Rohan, let's move to the next question as well, which is, now that you answered the quiz question for what does high availability mean, what are you currently doing about it? So we're really interested in how you're configuring for high availability right now. And again, we'll give you another second to answer that question. You'll see that in these questions, we're talking about availability zones. Rohan, recently you did some research about how many accounts are really set up to use 3 availability zones right now. Can you talk a little bit about what you found in that research?
Sure. I mean, based on our data, or the hundreds and thousands of domains running on our system, we found that less than 20% of the domains, or less than 30% of the domains, use 2AZ or 3AZ for their domains, and even lesser use 3AZ for their domains. Having multiple availability zones is one of the things that could help you with high availability. Not the only thing, but one of the things. Possibly it's hinting to the answer for this question. Let us know what you think in terms of what do you do for high availability today using OpenSearch, right? How do you ensure you get high availability today on OpenSearch?
And
Like, do you
Rohan,
create?
did that number surprise you, that only 20 to 30% are using that many availability zones now?
It was certainly eye-opening, because what you expect is people are running critical workloads on the service, right? They are front and center of their probably applications. Let's say an e-commerce giant is using OpenSearch as the search engine for its website, but it is not configured for 2AZ or 3AZ. They are running it with a lot of risk, right? If the AZ is lost due to anything, it could be network connectivity issue, it could be a node drop. Any of those issues can cause availability drop, and that's a direct impact to the business, right? So that was surprising. Like, people will leave it to chance.
Yeah. But it looks like we're having some issues with the polling feature. So why don't we just keep going, Rohin, with introducing us to what you have done with MultiAZ with Standby.
So let me introduce MultiAZ with Standby. Today, for example, on the Amazon OpenSearch service, you could have created a domain before MultiAZ with Standby, which is MultiAZ without Standby. In that particular case, you would probably, to get high availability, select multiple AZs, could be 2AZ, 3AZ. You would select dedicated master nodes, again, to ensure that if the one master node fails, one of the other master nodes can take its place and be elected as the master, and the cluster continues to work. You will have data nodes. You will again choose the multiple data nodes, again, ideally spread evenly across the 3 AZs or the 2 AZs as you might have chosen. And you also want to ensure that you have at least one copy of the data in each of the AZs. That's what you would ideally want to configure today. Having said that, a lot of these choices, as we speak about, are not something that was enforced in the multi-AZ with Standby. Customers, as Aina had through a question brought out, that we see a very few customers actually configure multi-AZ, right? And even fewer enable dedicated master nodes, and even fewer have a even number of data nodes across AZs, and very few actually have uh, two copies of data. Like if you have only one copy of data and you lose that, that's a recipe for disaster, right? You will lose your data. You will uh, also lose your domain in that particular scenario. It will not be available. You will not be able to respond to queries, ingest data. Any of that, your domain will become unavailable. So there are a lot of these best practices which have been widely documented and sort of presented in various formats in our documents and previous webinars, blogs, which are been around for quite some time. But having said that, we still feel that a lot of customers do not pay enough attention to that. And they get caught up in trying to understand what they exactly need to do. So with multi-AZ with Standby, we are making it very simple for customers to create a high availability domain, right? When you select this option, and we will see that in a demo, all of these rules would be applied as you create the domain. A lot of these will be enforced as you try and create the domain, which is what we have tried to do with multi-AZ with Standby. Simplify that experience, simplify the choices for you, help you make those informed choices as you go along, right? Similarly, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that when a failure occurs, let's say a node goes down, AZ goes down, or you have a network connectivity issue, uh, there is an impact in terms of how the domain reacts, right? The data is redistributed among the remaining resources. The traffic shapes in a manner where the uh, existing traffic moves to the remaining resources, which could put your domain under stress if you have not configured enough redundancy or kept enough headroom in terms of resource utilization, right? If your CPU utilization, for example, is very high already, or RAM utilization is very high already in terms of 70, 80, 90%, and one of these failures occur, the traffic that you had on the remaining or the impacted resource will get spread across the remaining resources. And sometimes this can lead to a situation where your domain becomes unstable, unavailable, and cause a spike in your search latencies or indexing latencies. So with multi-AZ with Standby, we have been able to ensure that in spite of the failure, you get consistent performance before and after the failure. Again, something that we'll touch upon in the demo. Also, in multi-AZ with Standby, we will automatically detect an issue, right? And do a failover to the standby. We'll talk about what is a standby in the subsequent slide. And I'll also talk about what the automatic failover means and when does it kick in, right? So if you look at this, this presents an architecture for a multi-AZ with Standby. This is a typical domain running a production grid cluster on our service. It has 3 master nodes. of which 2 are master eligible nodes. Then we have 9 data nodes, 3 spread across each of the 3 AZs, and you also have ultra-warm enabled for domains which want to use ultra-warm. In this particular case, what we do is we reserve the data nodes in one of the AZs. It is chosen on random. It is not always a ability zone 3, but it is an example, right? As standby. What does standby mean? Standby means that these nodes will not receive directly read or write traffic, right? They will only receive replication traffic or requests as the data is returned to the active nodes. So for example, if data is returned to active availability zone 1 or the data nodes in availability zone 1, it will be replicated to the other copies in availability zone 2 and availability zone 3. Both availability zone 1 and availability zone 2 are referred to as active AZs, and they received read and write traffic. So with this, what we are able to ensure is that if you have an impact in any of the active zones, let's say one of the node fails or a network switch fails, we are able to reposition or redirect the traffic to the availability zone 3, which will be promoted from a standby to an active AZ, right? The impacted node or the AZ, let's say availability zone 1, will go into recovery and will be marked as standby while the other 2 AZs are able to serve traffic. Uh, in, in doing so, what we are able to ensure is that the traffic that you were receiving prior to the failure to availability zone 1 and 2 are now met by availability zone 2 and 3 with the same traffic. I mean, same capacity, same resources. There's no reduction in the resources at this point in time. You have consistent performance before and after the event. It does take some time for us to move from, say, an availability zone 1 to availability zone 3 when a failure happens, which is when the automatic failover happens. We are automatically able to detect failure events, let's say a node drop, disk failure, a instance failure, network switch failures. And once those events are detected, we trigger the failover, the automatic failover to the standby. And when this happens, we try and achieve that in less than a minute. And while that in that minute of failover, right, you may see some errors, but this is for only the in-flight request, which have already reached possibly the impacted AZ. But once that failover is complete, any new request will be redirected to availability zone 3, which will then become the active AZ, right?
So Rohan,
Like
you've got about 1 minute left before the live demo. Did you want to hit the next slide too?
Sure. So yeah, touching upon some of the critical things that we have done as part of the multi-AZ with standby. Like I said, we provide 99.99% availability on a single domain. You do not need to set up multiple domains in a single region to get the 4 nines. We also ensure you have consistent performance before and after the event, after the failover, right? The automatic failover is a mechanism that we use to ensure that you have the same performance before and after the event, and also ensures that you have availability without impact, right? The standby AZ receives the replication traffic. It does not receive any read traffic. And we have implemented a number of guardrails as part of the system. For example, I was talking about you have to have 3 copies of data, 1 copy in each of the AZs. You have to have even number of nodes in each of the AZs. We also have features like indexing back pressure, search back pressure, which have been implemented to ensure that the traffic is not beyond what your domain can handle and the domain doesn't become unavailable or unstable, right? And again, we have simplified the configuration, which you should probably see in the demo that Prashant is going to do. So with that, handing over to Prashant to touch upon the demo and other pieces.
Thanks, Rohin. So I'm just sharing my screen, and to start with the demo, like once you log into the AWS console and go to the Amazon OpenSearch service, you will have an option to create the domain within the managed cluster And once you hit the create domain, then you will see two different options in terms of the domain creation, which has been added as part of the multi-AG with a standby feature. So here you have two options. One is the AG create, which will basically get the all the pre-configuration or all the best practice added by default in terms of the domain. So those best practices like the number of data nodes to be in the multiple of 3, like auto tune being enabled. You should have the dedicated master node. You should have like all of your data would be spread across 3 AG. And if you click on the AG create option, you don't have kind of a way to select the versions. So like multi-AG with standby is supported from starting the version OpenSearch 1.3 onwards, but the quick option gets you to the latest version, but you have an option to choose like whether you want to create your domain within VPC or the public access. So that's what you can specify over here. And then you can set up the security or the fine-grained access control where you can define the username and password for your master user. Apart from that, if you look at the settings for the EG create, so all the settings has been kind of pre-applied while you're creating the domains. Like you can see, we have the deployment type as multi-AG with a standby, you have the 3AG, and then by default, it's choosing like a 3 data node of R60.large. It has the GP3 volume type, and then some other things like dedicated master has been enabled. But the thing is, there are few configurations which you can change after you have created the quick domain, whereas there are few settings which you cannot change. So for example, if you want to add the ultra warm or cold storage after your domain has been created, you should be able to kind of change those settings once you have your domain enabled or domain active. So then this is kind of an option which you can use for the quick create option. And in terms of the standard create, this is the usual way what you have been using so far. And there we have like two settings added. And in terms of the deployment option, you have two options. One is the domain with standby and another is domain without standby. So domain without standby, you can consider as the traditional way how you have been creating the domain so far. And with the domain with standby, here you have an option to define everything like choosing the OpenSearch version. Like if you don't want the 2.5, like you can choose the 1.3 or other version of the OpenSearch. Then if you don't really want your domain to be started with 3 nodes and R60.large, then you have a freedom to choose whatever instance type you want to select for this particular domain. So these are the options which you will get if you're not choosing the quick create option, and you have the, I would say, feasibility or the functionality to select all the different settings what you want in your domain. The only thing is whenever you select the number of nodes, it has to be in multiple of 3. So for example, if I'm choosing the domain with a standby over here, and if I try to select the number of node as 5, then it's giving me the error like for 3AG domain, your number of instances should be in multiple of 3, but if I maybe make it as 12, it's fine, it's working. And apart from that, you have an option to enable the warm and cold storage at the same time when you are creating the domain. And another thing is you have to choose the dedicated master node if you are creating the domain with standby. So if I select, for example, C60.2x large, then for this one also you have the number of dedicated master node as 3. And over here you can see like how your domain is going to spread the number of nodes. Like all of the 3 nodes would be spread across 3 different AG. And same thing is available for your data node as well. That is kind of new in this UI. So here you can see like you will be having 2 active AG, and then the other one is AG dash, which is kind of a standby option over here. So which represent like you will be having 4 nodes each on each of these domain. So this is how you can create the domain. So let me jump back and show you the configuration of one of the domain which I have already created. And I wanted to show some of the metrics what you get as part of the multi-AG with standby. So if you go to the cluster health, here you can see like I have 1 node each on each of the 3 AGs, like US East 1, B, C, and D, whereas my D and C is currently active and B is on standby. And if you go at the bottom of the screen, you can see the AG rotation matrix. So one of the thing is where Rohin was talking about, like if you get any failures into the system, then the AG switch will happen within a minute. But apart from like the failure, we are also rotating the active AG every 30 minutes. So you can see over here, like any point of time, you have like 2 AG active and 1 being standby. So here, like at this moment, you can see my East 1D and 1B is kind of active and 1C is 0. And if you go to the next time window, in that case, my 1B becomes a standby, whereas C and D is active. So this is couple of metrics. And next, I want to show some more metrics about the multi-AG with standby. So here you can see at any point of time which particular node is active and which is not active. And if I'm plotting the chart at 3-hour window, so if you look at the time starting over here, so it's roughly around 30-minute interval where you have like one of the node being active, and at that time, like two other nodes are kind of active and one is standby. And another thing to note here is if you look at the utilization of the resources, so here whatever node is currently active, you can see the higher CPU utilization and memory utilization on those. Like all of my active domains are running around 80 to 85% CPU, whereas my standby domain is running around 15% of the CPU. And same thing happening with respect to the search. So like your search requests are basically catered by the active domains. And I think just now the switch happened. That's why you see the matrix over here as well. So it might have crossed that 30-minute window. But the thing is, if I refresh this graph, just give me a second. Yeah. So apart from the search latency, you can see how many indexing requests you are having, what are the indexing latency at each AG. And the thing what I wanted to highlight over here is like your search latency is not impacted when the AG switch happens. And you can see your search would be written by only two of the AGs, and one AG would be kind of standby and it will become active once the other one goes down. So with this, you get a kind of a feeling like what all different metrics are available if you want to monitor in case of multi-AG with standby, and how exactly you can configure the same. So let me switch back to my slides. So then what are some of the key takeaways? So basically these key takeaways are somewhat correlated with respect to the highlights what Rohit mentioned. What Rohin mentioned. So like first one is like you get 4 nines of availability, which means you are reducing your downtime from 8.77 hours to kind of 52.6 minutes per year. And in case of failure to active AG, a standby AG will take it over. And because all of the nodes in one AG would be reserved and available as standby for all the search traffic. Then there are some other measures and guardrails which prevent the domain to become unstable, where like service also has the fault injection to kind of switch the AG every 30 minutes, and then which has been built by considering all the best practice what we have seen for running like tens of thousands of clusters within the managed service. And lastly, you can use this particular feature starting from version OpenSearch 1.3 and above, and it is available across all the regions which has 3 AG or more. So what next? How do you get started? So you can launch an Amazon OpenSearch service domain in minutes by following the Getting Started tutorial and learn more about how does multi-AG with standby works with the OpenSearch service. Apart from those resources, we also have a couple of other resources which are related to like OpenSearch project, OpenSearch service, like how you can get started with the OpenSearch project as well. And then we have a couple of emergent days which help you to kind of get the online training and with the hands-on lab. And then if you want to get connected with us, we have like all of the resources available on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, Meetup, where you can reach out to the OpenSearch project if you have any feedback or suggestions. So with that, I will hand it over to Aina for a
Yeah.
closing thoughts.
So thanks, Prashant. I'm glad to see that all of those metrics are pretty astounding. Rohan, I just want to touch on one thing before we close. In the two blogs that people can check out, also on multi-AZ with standby, you talk about automatic failure detection and recovery and auto tune. We didn't get to touch on any of that today. If you had 30 seconds to sum up what those are, go.
Sure. So there are two blogs. One was the launch blog, which sort of gave you a flavor of what Prashant did. He created a demo, created a domain. You can see that in the launch blog. And the second was something that we were very proud of in terms of the engineering that went into doing multi-AZ with standby, which you can read about in under the hood blog that we have posted in the chat room. It's a very interesting read in terms of how we have been able to achieve multi-AZ with standby feature and also the 99.99% availability. A lot of the things that this feature depends on have also been contributed to the open source project. So it will be an interesting read on that.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks you guys for joining us today. You can always hit up Rohin, Prashant, or myself on LinkedIn if you have further questions. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy MultiAZ with Standby and all the high availability and auto tuning benefits coming your way. Thank you and have a great day.